From his electrifying stage presence and towering platinum hair, to his unforgettable contributions to soul and rock, Wayne Cochran was a musical force like no other. Today we remember the man behind the anthem Last Kiss, exploring his rise to fame, his impact on music, and his journey of reinvention that left a legacy as bold as his style. Talvin Wayne Cochran was born on May 10, 1939, the eldest child of Talvin Sr., a cotton mill worker, and the former Minnie Lee Starley, a homemaker. Young Talvin's love of music came naturally, as his parents listened every Saturday night to the honky-tonk hits on the radio. Talvin would later say that he never heard color in music growing up in Thomaston, Georgia, but instead focused on the way he felt while listening to it. Being drawn to rhythm and blues music, it wasn't long before he formed his first band, the Blue Cats.
We'd play around on the weekends, on front porches, and in people's living rooms,
he recalled in a 1997 article. While still in high school, Cochran fronted his next band, the Rockin' Capris, dropping out in the 9th grade to pursue music as a full-time career, after the school gave him an ultimatum of cutting his hair or being expelled. Cochran knew he had to leave his small hometown if he wanted to make it big in the music industry. In a strong leap of faith, he made the move to Macon, Georgia in the late 1950s, and it didn't take long for him to meet up with other up-and-comers in the business. He first befriended soul singer and future legend Otis Redding, going on to play bass guitar on Redding's early recording of Shout Bamalama and its B-side Fat Girl. It was also during this time that Cochran recorded his first single, The Coup, in turn attracting the attention of King Records, who immediately signed him to a record deal. Cochran also found a friend in King label mate James Brown, who Cochran credited with influencing his own stage show. Cochran's road band, the CC Riders, was a soul music revue that sometimes included as many as 14 musicians, and 2 female backup vocalists known as the Sheer Delights. With his killer horn section and wild energy-packed ensemble, Cochran headed to Bossier, Louisiana, where he headlined at a popular club called Sax Boom Boom Room, much to the delight of locals. During his time with King Records, Cochran cut what would become his signature song, Going Back to Miami. While the song was a local hit and received regular radio time, it wasn't a commercial success beyond the South. Cochran and the CC Riders quickly developed a reputation for their energetic performances, often leaving the stage and marching through the crowd and onto the dance floor, with his rhythm section following suit.
We'd be out there in the audience, standing on tables. We'd make the whole room part of the show. Sometimes we would even throw bottles and chairs.
The group toured extensively, especially in the South and Midwest, playing roadhouses and nightclubs, including a place in Muncie, Indiana, where a student at Ball State University heard about Mr. Cochran's frenetic shows. Almost 2 decades later, in 1982, that student, David Letterman, had Mr. Cochran as a guest on Late Night, and Mr. Cochran told the story of how he had hit upon his distinctive look.
I had been messing with my hair, trying to get what I wanted. I really couldn't figure it out.
Then, at a neighboring club, he saw a group featuring the young Johnny and Edgar Winter, both albinos.
There was a great thing about their hair. Every time the lights over their heads changed colors, their hair changed colors. And I said, now there's the color, if I could figure out how to get it.
He hired a stylist with a bottle of bleach, but the initial experiment did not go well.
We must have bleached it for 2 or 3 days, and it came up strawberry red, and then about fell out. But we finally got it up platinum, and he teased it up like the old Trojan warriors.
Cochran and his band maintained a rigorous touring schedule and sat for many interviews on the television talk show circuit. One major supporter of Cochran's was Jackie Gleason, who had caught a performance of Cochran's while he was in Miami at the Barn, and immediately booked him on his show. In 1966, Gleason introduced Cochran to his audience saying, "He doesn't just sing, he explodes," Mr. Gleason wrote. "He doesn't perform, he happens. And when he happens, everything in the immediate vicinity vibrates and responds." Gleason also wrote the liner notes for the 1967 album, Wayne Cochran. In addition to being a singer and performer, Cochran also wrote many of his own songs. One of his best-known works was 1961's Last Kiss, which he claimed was inspired by a friend of a friend who lost her life in a tragic car accident while on a first date. Although the song wasn't a hit for Cochran, it was recorded by numerous other artists, such as Canadian group Wednesday in the 1970s, and later by Pearl Jam in 1998. The 1964 cover by J. Frank Wilson and the Cavaliers went on to be a national hit, and is the most often recognized by fans. By the late 1960s, Cochran had settled in Las Vegas, which served as a base of operations and offered him numerous residencies in the many casinos and hotels on the Strip. It was during this time that Cochran met and befriended music icon Elvis Presley, whom he admired greatly. Cochran took inspiration from Presley's style, adopting jumpsuits into his wardrobe and styling his hair in a very pronounced pompadour. Cochran was often compared to singer James Brown due to his epic hair and endless energy, earning him the nickname of the White Knight of Soul. In the early 1970s, Cochran returned to his southern roots in King Records, where he released Alive and Well and Living, In a Bitch of a World and the instrumental High and Riding, both in 1970. These albums saw the CC Riders guitarist and musical director, Charles Brent, take an important creative role, and featured a jazz-influenced sound comparable to the Chicago Transit Authority, or Blood, Sweat and Tears. Cochran also recorded a live album, actually a live in the studio record, for King sometime between 1967 and 1969, but released in 2014. And included in an Ace Records compilation going back to Miami, The Soul Sides, 1965 to 1970. Cochran released his last album, Cochran, in 1972, under the Epic Records label, touring afterward, and later following up by appearing on numerous television shows post-promotion. As so happened with many performers during that time, Cochran fell into drug use and consuming too much alcohol, which wreaked havoc on his health, finances, and family ties.
I remember dreading the thought of living another 30 or 40 years,
he said in a 1997 article, speaking of what he was going through in the mid-1970s and early 80s.
I had this absolute fear of tomorrow. I had everything. I had gone from nothing to everything and was heading back to nothing.
In 1981, Cochran retired from music and found his second calling to minister the gospel in Miami, Florida. He founded the Voice for Jesus Ministries, which at its peak held roughly 600 members. Cochran credited his faith for repairing the fractured relationship his destructive habits caused. Cochran was married to first wife Inez Newton in the 1950s, and to second wife Monica Powell in the mid-1960s. Cochran had 3 children, a son Christopher Cochran and 2 daughters, Cynthia Warford and another daughter, Diane, who predeceased him in death. He also had numerous grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
Standing up here, in praise and worship, every Sunday morning, is my granddaughter and my great-granddaughter,
he told his congregation in an address on the theme of Believe in the early 2000s.
In the sound booth is my son-in-law. My son is here. Isn't that wonderful?
Wayne Cochran passed away from cancer on November 21, 2017, in Miramar, Florida. He was 78 years old. Cochran is referenced in the 1980 film The Blues Brothers, and a cover of his song, Going Back to Miami, is featured on the live album Made in America. Cochran appeared and sang in the 1970 movie C.C. and Company as himself. The movie trailer, featuring a scene with Cochran and his band, the C.C. Riders, performing the song I Can't Turn You Loose, was later used in the 2019 Quentin Tarantino movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Thanks so much for tuning into today's video. I post new videos every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So be sure to like, subscribe, and click the bell to catch every episode where we dive into the celebrity afterlife.